Okay, I know the quality already is not the hottest because of the lighting, but unfortunately I had an entire intro set up and, well, I realized that the old microphone here was not capturing any audio whatsoever. That's always fun to find out in editing. Anyway, everybody, I got a special one for you today. It's gonna be a multi-part series, but believe me, it'll be well worth the listen. So just a quick bit of background. Be careful what you bargain for when you become a teacher, because you might end up dealing with a student like this. So, everybody, go ahead and get your favorite drink, get your favorite food, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alright, today's story comes courtesy of Count of Cristo Monte, or Mont, with the story of, I used to be a teacher. I worked in a rough neighborhood, but one of my students was more difficult than the rest. Enjoy. Through the strange machinations of fate, and the disingenuous recruiting practices of a national nonprofit, I found myself in a room full of 8th graders that day, and not sitting in a bar. I'm Mr. Russo, I boomed to the class, and I'll be your history teacher this year. I looked out amongst the 30 or so faces in front of me. Some looked up with excitement and others with boredom, and still others with the expression of sheer devastation worn only by 13-year-olds who find that summer break has yet again somehow drawn to a close. But one face looked different. From the back of the class in the final row of seats, a young man stared up at me. His features were sharp and angular, and over one beady dark eye, he had a pale pink port wine stained birthmark shaped like a long, thin leaf. And I struggled to describe his expression that morning, but the best that I can do is say that he wore a mysterious, wry smile, like he knew a secret. I taught at a school on the far north side of a large southern city. On my first drive out to the campus, I marveled at how the skyscrapers and luxury sedans of downtown gave way to first strip malls and minivans, and then to discount stores and rusted-out clunkers. On that first journey, this urban blight inspired not fear but pride. So effective was the nonprofit's brainwashing that I felt sure I could change the world here. And if not the world, then this little corner of it. And if not even this little corner, then perhaps just the life of one child. Now, it's hard to even type out that garbage without wincing. At that first faculty meeting, excited and well-rested teachers introduced themselves with the sort of bouncy exuberance found only at summer camps, youth ministries, and middle school campuses. Charlie Russo, I chirped when my turn came. I'm originally from Austin, Texas, and I graduated from Emory University. I checked my watch with theatrical flourish. And about 6 weeks ago, the assembled teachers laughed, and some of the older veterans groaned with mock exasperation. My fun fact is, I'm allergic to tree nuts. Boy, that is about the least fun fact I have ever heard. An older woman with a teased-up mess of dyed blonde hair shook her head at me from a few tables over. The prompt was name a fun fact, not explain why you got bullied in middle school. The crowd laughed again, and my face must have fallen because a stocky bald man at my table jumped quickly at my defense. Thompson, just because you have rodents older than this kid living in that beehive of a top on your head doesn't mean you can start ripping on him. A tall, lanky teacher 2 seats down from me continued in a slightly nasal, excited baritone. Green's right, y'all. I thought we agreed not to unseal Thompson's tomb until September this school year. I laughed aloud involuntarily, but clearly my amusement came up a bit too soon because the tall man spun to me. Young man, this is a faculty meeting. The new student orientation isn't until next week. The exchange brought the house down, and it took a raised hand from the principal to quiet the crowd. Once the dust settled and the exercise went on, Thomas Kelly, the lanky teacher, 2 seats to my left, had graduated from Tulane a few years back. Leanne Thompson, the older woman with the big hair, had graduated from Georgetown when Reagan was president. And Arnold Green, the bald man at my table, had finished at Morehouse this century. The other folks around the room introduced themselves as well, but their names didn't stick. And before I'd even processed who taught what, we'd been dismissed to grade-level meetings. Conversation rose quickly to a buzz as the room slowly cleared. I fell into step beside Mr. Kelly, Mr. Green, and Mrs. Thomas, and the 4 of us exchanged pleasantries over the distance from the cafeteria to the 8th grade hallway. Thompson, who doubled as English teacher and grade-level dean, led us to her room. "Yours is just across the hall," she gestured magnanimously toward an empty class. "Drop your stuff and meet me back here in 5. I smiled and crossed the hall. My room was a bit bigger than I thought it would be, but I may have gotten that impression from the fact that other than a heavy, peeling teacher's desk pushed into a far corner, the room was completely empty. Bland gray drop-in tiles, ubiquitous to underfunded schools nationwide, sagged from the ceiling, and dark blue carpet, ragged but clean, spanned the length of the floor. I didn't have much to drop off. Still, though, I sat at the teacher's desk and dug into the back, finding only my school welcome packet and an old EpiPen. I spun in my chair a bit and marveled at the strange situation. This is not how I'd pictured my early 20s. "Russo, quit jerking off in there, we're waiting for you." I started a bit of unexpected vulgarity, then just chuckled, dropped the contents of my bag into the desk's bottom drawer, and jogged across the hall back to Thompson's room. The class looked like a page in a marketing brochure. The whiteboard gleamed clean and bare from the front of the room, and streamers in Hoya blue and gray hung from the walls alongside photos of students at the high school, and even college graduates. A pile of beanbag chairs filled a corner, and Christmas lights hung from the ceiling to illuminate the room with a warm glow. Thompson caught me marveling. "I'll help you set yours up, big guy. Don't worry." She laughed and patted me on the back as Kelly and Green pushed several desks together. The 4 of us sat, and Thompson passed out 4 folders before launching immediately into the agenda. "First thing, boys, we have a new student this year." The old teacher tapped his folder with a pen and went on. "Laura just moved in from out of state, and we don't know much about her yet, but let's just be sure to keep an eye out for her." Green interjected as Thompson finished. "You mean she's coming here on purpose?" The older woman gave him a reproachable look, but he continued. All I'm saying is, if I knew I'd have a mean, old divorced version of Dolly Parton for an English teacher, I'd find another school." "You know, you're more disruptive in these meetings than the kids are in my class." Thompson shook her head, then turned to me. "Now, I'm not divorced, by the way. I'm a widow. My poor late husband died of colorectal cancer a few years back." Kelly sputtered and Green let out a barking laugh. I looked from one man to the other, not getting the joke. "Colorectal cancer?" Green managed to get through his laughter. "I thought it was gangrene of the testicles." Kelly composed himself and then turned to me deadpan. "He lives in Vegas with his old housekeeper." Thompson crossed herself and, smiling beatifically, said only, "God rest his soul." The rest of the meeting proceeded in a similar fashion. Green, Kelly, and Thompson kept up a near constant banter of mild insults, good-natured ribbing, and foul language. I managed to get a couple of zingers in of my own, but mostly I marveled at the prattle as them began reevaluating completely what my own teachers must have been like behind closed doors. As the meeting began to wrap up, though, Thompson's expression darkened. And as if sensing where the conversation was heading, Kelly and Green sobered as well. Last thing on the agenda, y'all. I looked to the folder. The final item on the list consisted of just a single name. Jacob. Mrs. Thompson cast her gaze to each of us, but I knew from Kelly and Green's reaction that really, she spoke only to me. Now Jacob transferred here about halfway through last year. She cleared her throat. He's a tough young man. She looked again around the table, as if seeking support. Green seemed fascinated by the surface of his desk, and Kelly looked pointedly at the wall of photos. Thompson took a deep breath, and then she went on. I don't know what to say about this boy. She dropped all pretense of talking to the other men at the table and looked me straight in the eye. I've been a teacher longer than you've been alive, Rousseau, and I've never met a kid like him. A heavy silence over the room after a long moment. Thompson continued. Now, Jacob was involved in a handful of incidents that we know of last year. The way she pronounced incident made clear that the word here was a euphemism. The boy has a knack for figuring out exactly what's going on to bother his teachers, ex-boyfriends, racial sensitivities, even, well, I'll let you imagine. She cleared her throat. We don't exactly censor ourselves around each other, as I'm sure you can tell. She gave a mirthless chuckle. But we still don't know where he drags this stuff up from. So I suppose just keep a lid on what you share when you don't think the kids are listening. She looked at Kelly. The two exchanged a glance, and then Kelly picked up the thread. We also had a few classroom pets go missing last year. I had a lizard in my classroom. Stinky. He laughed a bit at the name. I got Jacob one day for something he was doing in the hall. I don't even remember what. But there was a bunch of other kids around, and I didn't know it at the time, but he doesn't like to be embarrassed. With every word, a bit more of the lanky teacher's exuberance seemed to evaporate. Anyway, the next morning I came into the room to find Stinky dead. He trailed off for a moment and then swallowed. I know he was just a lizard, but it was pretty clear that he had not died of natural causes. Kelly set his jaw and Green jumped in. The lizard was skinned, like with a knife. I gasped involuntarily. The whole story took a moment to process. Some part of me suspected that the three of them might be playing a new guy prank, but the teachers around me stayed silent, and the hope quickly evaporated. Well, what did the other kids do about him? I asked. I couldn't think of what else to say. That's the thing, Thompson answered. He doesn't mess with the other kids, just the teachers. Was the lizard incident him? I tried to phrase the question delicately, as Kelly still seemed to be bothered by the events. Can't say for sure. The other man met my eyes. We asked him about it, and he wouldn't admit to anything. But there's no way to prove it. He looked away, then after a moment turned back to me. The entire time I spent talking to him about it, he had this look on his face. Another pause. Like he knew a secret. Alright, everybody, that is going to go ahead and wrap up part 1 to this story. This is a lot more than what I was expecting. This is really, really well written, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So, guys, gals, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Be prepared for part 2 coming out very, very soon. And, well, everybody, as always, make sure to drive safe. And I'll see y'all. Now I'm talking Southern. And I'll see all of you again very, very soon.